Well, howdy there, folks. James, Political Friar, coming to you again. I got the University of Oregon hat on, and so we're going to have another little chat about a political topic. Today's topic is inspired by Harvard's president, Claudia Gay, resigning. And she resigned based off of two things, basically. One was some allegations of plagiarism, which are fundamentally not enough to get her to resign, but the main reason why she's out is because of her comments to a congressional committee asking about anti Semitism on American college campuses. And her comments were, well, you have to have free speech, and you have to let politics have its moment on campuses, and that campuses should be a forum for an exchange of ideas. And this largely reflects the conventional wisdom that has been around on American college campuses since the 60s. See, 1967, the University of Chicago commissioned a report from Harry Calvin to come up with a statement about how a university ought to address social and political controversies. And this is in the teeth of the anti war movement. There were protests riling college campuses at sizes that, Black Lives Matter protests rivaled, but very few before or since have. And the message that Harry Calvin put out was that a university is a bulletin board on which anyone should be able to post their message. It's a very, very liberal free speech idea, which is to say, I will condemn your speech with my speech, but I shall not prevent you from saying it. And this idea, were it to actually be the policy of Harvard and UPenn and MIT, wouldn't have gotten Dr. Gay in trouble. And the problem is it's not their policy. And you can tell based on how they actually run their campuses. Their policy is not to be even handed in politics. These campuses are bastions of left wing ideology and advocacy. It is impossible that they couldn't be. The people who go to these schools and the people who teach at these schools are members of that particular ideology. They follow it. They believe it's true, and they are inevitably biased by it. It's not even consciously their fault, but it's definitely a moment where they are going to be rightly called hypocrites when they hide behind this idea that they're fair and balanced on Israel. They're not. They might be willing to be a forum on Israel to allow anti-Semites to put their message forward and Israeli supporters put their message forward, but they're not going to do that on other issues. And the most clear and recent example of this was the Black Lives Matter movement. Any way you look at it, the Black Lives Matter movement was a political movement. It was, in my opinion, my political opinion, addressing an incredibly important part of American life, which is the pervasiveness of kind of low-level racism. And it's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about in a political way, but the universities went a step further than providing a forum. Many universities put out messages in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And the Black Lives Matter movement's got its controversies. One of its followers murdered 3 cops in Texas. That's not a reasonable political statement. That's terrorism. And they were associated with that movement. And so it's a political movement, and the university supported it. And then a political movement of fighting anti-Semitism arises, and the universities don't support it. And in that, you can see the universities aren't being true to their own stated values. And in that hypocrisy, Claudia Gay didn't have the ability in that congressional hearing to give the sort of legally, technically correct answer that the university should be a forum, because it's clearly not a forum for the free exchange of ideas. It is clearly a forum for progressive advocacy. And in that progressive advocacy represents a pretty small portion of the population. You're talking about truly progressive ideologues. It's got to be, less than 10% of the population, in the same way that true MAGA ideologues are less than 10% of the population. A huge number of people were alienated. And you see this backlash as all through society. these colleges, these academic institutions, were early advocacies of equity and inclusion departments, and that's a good idea. You should have equity and inclusion, and you should be paying attention to it. You shouldn't just brush off issues as non-issues. But inevitably, these departments become staffed by ideologues that lose sight of equity and inclusion and start dealing with retribution and restoration. And the only people to be retributed against are white male cisgender. And it turns out that's 31% of the population. When you have a group that is advocating fundamentally against the interests of 31% of the population, no matter how much that 31% of the population deserves that collective punishment, there's going to be a backlash. It's just too many people to condemn. And so you end up with movements like MAGA. And that is a natural consequence of progressive ideological overreach. And that is what cost Claudia Gay her job. She fell into that progressive ideological mindset while president at Harvard. She allowed conservative speakers to be canceled. She stifled speech that was seen as inappropriate. She supported things like trigger warnings and safe spaces to protect liberal ears from messages they don't want to hear. And then she said that she was an advocate of free speech. Now that hypocrisy won't stand. And it didn't. Anyway, tell me how wrong I am in the comments down below. Leave me a message about what I need to do next. Maybe hit that like button and the subscribe button. More than anything, I just enjoy doing these things, and tell a friend. Thanks.